Stephen and Bronwynn, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of manufacturing. But before we go into the future, can you tell us a little bit about your own background? Where did you grow up, Steve?
Yes, I grew up in Johannesburg, now called Gauteng. I've been here all my life, so I didn't have the opportunity to really go overseas and study or anything like that. But yeah, I'm born and bred in Johannesburg.
And tell us, what was your dream career when you grew up?
So I didn't really have a dream career to say, per se. What I did know is that I really enjoyed working with my hands, and I had just a instinct, let's say, just to that was just calling me just to, build things. And I really just enjoyed. I remember some things back at home when I was young, probably about 3 or 4 years old, where I often used to just grab things like radios or something, and my mom used to go crazy. But and just taking apart those radios and then trying to put them back together. Now they never got back together again when I was 3 or 4 years old, or even 7 or 8. But that's really, so as a dream career, I didn't have one, but I knew that I was really good at working with my hands. And so that's actually how I started to drift into the industrial sector of the world, let's say, so yeah.
And who inspired you in your early days?
So inspiration, I think a lot of it came from my father and my brother. We are all entrepreneurs at heart. So that's really, again, where I got my inspiration. A lot of my upbringing was actually in a factory environment. So my father used to have a rubber company, and we used to go there on holidays, school holidays. I used to work within the factory itself, and often just with their employees, just get to work, get paid a small wage, and do the work that they used to do. So I was able to see that environment and see how they ran a factory, how they were able to build a business, etc., etc. So I think that's who inspired me the most is definitely my brother, who's Terry Stanley, and my father was Peter Stanley.
And tell us, Steve, looking back over your career, would you say there was a major turning point, or maybe a number of turning points?
Yeah, so definitely there was a number of turning points in my career. I can very clearly remember the first time that I decided to actually start a company. So my previous boss, I've only actually ever worked for 2 people. And that's a little amount, actually, if you think about it. It was the 2 people and myself. But I think that was my first turning point, is just making that decision to saying, I'm going to go for it, and then just, go balls to the wall. Just make that decision and go for it. So that was when I was young, and I was about 22 years old. And you obviously have to have a lot of stamina, a lot of guts to just say, I'm going to put the time and effort into what my decision is. I also remember a lot of times that my friends were going on gap years, or doing fun things where I didn't have that availability to myself. I had a business that I needed to run at 22 years old, and often I used to find myself working in a machine at probably 2 o'clock in the morning. So I think that was a decision that I had to make. What do I want out of life, and where do I want to head to as a business owner? So that was the first milestone or turning point for me. And then my second biggest turning point was when I decided to actually buy my own property to move the factory into. So that was it was a whole. The way that you look at it is totally different, because you can do things different in your own premises. You're not now all of a sudden under a handbrake from your lessee or your landlord. So you're able to do a lot more, and it gives you a lot more flexibility on your business. So that was the second turning, big 2 milestones that I can really put my hand down to. Yeah.
And Steve, what would you say is driving you today?
What is driving me? So, look, my personality itself is very driven. I'm a very driven person, and you know, I can't sit still. I love to see things grow. So, it doesn't matter whether it is growing a business, growing a property business, or growing a product itself. You know, so seeing a product starting at a certain point and then growing it and making it getting it over the line. I think that's the key thing, and so that's what drives me a lot of the time. It's just that growth aspect of things. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure.
Now, Bronwynn, please tell us, where did you grow up?
I'm also a Gautenger, but I grew up in Pretoria and then did a bit of time in the Cape where I studied and then came back to Joburg. And I've been there since.
And what was your dream career?
I honestly didn't have a dream career. I feel like I muddled through life. I was explaining to Steve the other day. As a young, call me a girl, growing up, I took stuff apart and tried to put it back together. But there wasn't much encouragement at that stage for little girls to go and study engineering or find practical outlets for careers. And so I spent most of my young, early career doing what I now recognize as subsidiary work to what I really am passionate about and good at. So I worked in software solutions and building software solutions and then building hardware solutions and then, you know, but always problem solving. So yeah, I think my dream career is pretty much probably where I am now. I'm an operational person. I'm a creative problem solver, but I didn't discover that until much later in life.
And who inspired you in your early days?
In my early days, I'm going to be stereotypical and say my mother, but she did. My mom has always been a boundary breaker. So she's always been a bit of a rebel, and her attitude was, if people say it can't be done, you should do it. So I think from an inspiration perspective, I've always looked up to people who function without fear, who are just not afraid of failing. I think that's the thing that keeps us all back. I think similarly you experience that you are not afraid of failing. It's going to happen, but if you're too scared to try, you're never going to try. So yeah, I think my mom.
And looking back over your career, Bronwynn, would you say there was a major turning point?
Yeah, absolutely. I took a season out of my career. I started moving very quickly up the corporate ladder and reached a point where I realized it just wasn't headed in a direction I loved. So I took a step out of that and was a mom for a while, a full-time mom for a while. And then my husband and I decided to start our own business, so very similarly. And for me, that was a turning point because that was the first time I got to step into a business and do the things that came naturally and passionately and, you know, really just experienced what I was good at rather than what you are given when you take on a role, you know, when you move into a job and you fulfill a specific role. So that really just showed me actually I suppose the last piece of the puzzle came together where how I function and how I think lined up with what I'm actually good at doing. So yeah.
And tell us, Bronwynn, what is driving you today?
I love solving problems. For our business, I run our operations and I thoroughly enjoy pulling things apart that are not functioning properly and putting them together again in a proper functional way. So I'm honestly inspired by when things don't work properly. I enjoy it. So it doesn't get me down or make me feel demotivated when it's not optimal. I actually thoroughly enjoy fixing it and making it optimal. So I'm inspired probably by problems. How awful is that? But
and you're still taking things apart, but now you're putting them back together.
Well, there we go. Now I have some skills to put them back together, but not clocks. Those are still broken, and they're just never going to go back together. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Steve, how do you see manufacturing changing in the future?
In South Africa. So, obviously, currently manufacturing in South Africa is quite small at the moment, I see, you know. And we've gone through maybe the last 10 years where we've been trying to like Bronwynn said, break that problem apart of how do we actually manufacture in South Africa, and then say to ourselves, right, well, now we know what the problem is, you know, how do we solve that problem? And I think manufacturing in South Africa has got huge opportunities. There's huge opportunities within South Africa that entrepreneurs can take advantage of. They just need to find ways to tap into that. And so if our government or organizations for that matter are able to give us that, find those support structures, and flag them for young entrepreneurs, then our country will quickly start becoming a manufacturing hub.
Yes.
So it's really for that to become available to us, because we do have entrepreneurs in our country. I believe that's what our nature of our country is entrepreneurial, and it's exciting to often just read some articles where a young black gentleman has started up his business, and he's with one machine, and very similar to what I did, and he's really taking the effort to start up a business. But it's not just one guy that's doing that. You see it often, and you see that with small businesses out there as well. And even though they're struggling by themselves, they still go and do it. And so now all that we need to do in manufacturing is bolt on something that supports them, and then they will flourish, which is exciting.
And do you think that will happen? Do you see more of that happening?
That is a good question. It is hard. I mean, hard being, some of the higher powers, let's say, are quite stubborn. I think we've got to try and change our way of thinking in how we actually support the young entrepreneurs of this world, and how do we actually bring them tools to support them better.
Do you know where we've discussed seeing some of this functioning? To your point of will it happen or not? I think there is question about whether it will happen from a higher structure support perspective. But even just looking at crisis now, where we are seeing it is intercompany support structure. So, I know we'll talk about it later, but the resilience of South Africans. We have historically in this industry, you inherit factory workers, you inherit staff who have nothing else to do and come and work because they need work. Whereas I think as the industry grows and as the recognition of the opportunity for manufacturing in South Africa grows, to have more people coming out of school with practical learning skills who desire to work in this industry, who don't accidentally end up in this industry, but who are actually aspiring, exactly, who are aspiring into these environments. And at that point, I think the more companies like ourselves are putting effort and energy into growing the industry and growing the staff into that industry, and the more we can start impacting education eventually, it's part of the desire, the more we actually will have the impetus from the bottom, if that makes sense. So it's not waiting for the top end only, but just going, the lack of toolmakers in this country, the lack of those sorts of things going, the opportunity is vast, but the early passion and the early career path has to be set as well. And that's really where I think businesses like ourselves are actually actively able to input.
Yes, have an input into that,
Yes.
and create that shift.
And we see that happening. So we definitely see that happening.
Brilliant. Okay, that's good to hear.
Yeah, I think another thing that could change the future is awareness. Is something that I think even when I was a youngster, I wasn't very aware of what the manufacturing industry was all about. And if we start again trying to make our young entrepreneurs aware of what is injection molding or what is blow molding, and then also starting to look at then how do we direct them into what do they enjoy, what is their personalities, because that's another big thing, is that personalities run certain types of sectors of the industry, and you need a certain personality for industrial. So I think if we can target those personalities, we will be able to then also change the future and get manufacturing per se up, get a lot more manufacturers on board, getting them supported. So what is it? It's two big things. Is awareness is one of them. We've got to try and start making our youngsters aware of these things. As Bronwynn says, like tool makers, there isn't enough tool makers in our country at all. And yet we've got so many skilled people that work for us. So we just need to try and redirect them, get those programs going and support them.
Because they need to know what's available, and like you said, let them figure out which parts they find appealing, and then work into those ones, and then we'll be able to satisfy those positions.
Do you know what the financial industry does, which is fascinating? But they have these huge foundations, and granted, they're all, gathered together, but they have these huge foundations that start forecasting 40 years into the future to say what kind of employees are we going to need to keep growing as an industry, and they start investing into education at that level.
Yes, now already.
Now already at early learning levels, and further to start growing awareness of the types of careers they'll want, of the sort of skills you'll need. So they're growing, like what do you call it, a workforce, 40 years in advance. And from a manufacturing perspective, it isn't as, I suppose, it's not as big as the financial industry in South Africa, but if you look at the opportunity, it certainly can be bigger. And at that point, going where private industry can get involved is exactly that, is to go, how do you become aware? If I don't know what a toolmaker does, and I speak from experience, this is a newer industry for me, specifically in manufacturing. I'd had no idea what a toolmaker does. Why would I know unless I actually work in industrial? I've never been exposed to any of these things. So it's really on that front to go, we have a whole workforce needing work with absolute capability and just limited exposure to our industry specifically.
Yeah, because they don't know what's out there.
Yeah.
And I think part of what the financial sector does well is they make finance sexy. So like.
Yes, why would you want to go?
Yeah. So how do you think that could work in manufacturing? How would you make manufacturing sexy?
Who are you going to ask?
I don't know how you make it sexy, but again, I think it's about finding the right personality. I think again, often what you're finding is that in a college or in a university, they're making you aware of, well, you can do accounting, you can do
your
professional work like a lawyer, or you can become a doctor, or it's all professional. And the personality, often that personality is not that. It's they are industrial, or they like working with their hands and their
practical.
But they're not. There's no education around that. They're always just professional, and we've got to. Again, there's got to be that break in that education, the educational gap between just educating them to saying no, stop. If you are this type of personality, you should be doing industrial work, and you can start up your own business. So how do you do it? Well, if you want to become a toolmaker, do the toolmaking course. And then go from there and do a small business course. And then from there you start up your own tool room and you start servicing the industry. It's that simple, really, it is that simple. But what is currently happening is that it is just here's the only thing you can be is a professional. You can't be this other side.
The lucrative careers are professionals.
Yes.
Interestingly to that point, and I think all of us in this room are old enough to remember, but schooling historically was the kids who couldn't learn went to technical schools. It was almost like the downgrade of proper learning was go and learn to work with your hands. And interestingly, I'm seeing with my children now a shift just in their mentality of different types of learning being equal. You're absolutely capable if you learn practically as much as you are if you learn academically. But until we recognize that practical learning is as intelligent and as lucrative, it's just a kind of intelligence. And I found exactly that. When I started working, the world came alive for me. Studying was really hard. I just couldn't contextualize, and I kind of did what I needed to. But the minute I hit the workforce and I was able to actually apply logic into the environment, I flourished.
To find yourself.
I found myself. So to Steve's point, we are slowly shifting there, but the kind of personalities that enjoy and where I find my happy spaces, I can flourish. It makes sense to me. I can grow. There is expansion, and it's actually quite lucrative. I mean, it is a skill. Toolmaking, for instance, is an actual skill, like design, like etc. It is well paid. It has huge growth capacity, but it's completely unknown. And still, I think, in South Africa, still looked down upon as manual labor.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Which is really sad. Yeah.
Which is really sad, because actually it's a really good career path. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting combination with the John. Also, both of you touched on the idea of potential aptitude testing and maybe personality testing as well. So, because I remember, like you say, I mean, maybe a bit of an assumption, but when you said our age, going to school in the early 80s, there were aptitude tests, and they would recommend in primary school already what they suggest you head towards, and then again in high school. I don't know if that still happens, but maybe adding personality into that, and also, like you say, understanding that something like tooling is not something for a technical school or a second, a lower grade. It's something to aspire to.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, interestingly, the aptitude tests have changed so significantly since we all did them at school, so that I think they probably still do. But if I look at the stuff we're applying into our company now, the kind of aptitude testing and the kind of personality testing, it's much wider than what we did as young people. So that sort of knowledge and that EQ assessment and measurement exists absolutely now, and you see it in the corporate world. I don't know yet if it's being applied down into the educational world. And the understanding of personalities. I mean, I remember just before I hit university, I don't know if everybody did that, we went for career guidance counseling where they did aptitude testing, and I like problem solving, so I thought I should be a psychologist, like solve people's problems. Yeah, it's what you do. And I remember doing the test, and the lady said to me, I think you're probably more suited for management than psychology. Psychology, you let them find the problem. You are more likely to want to tell people their problem and pass them around about how to fix it. But from that was the full extent of explaining what would be good for me. Yeah. And so I did a BCom because that's what everybody does. If you're going to go, it's a generalist, there we go. Versus now understanding what does it mean if actually this is how you're testing. The whole world of careers open up to you.
Yes,
and understanding
what would you have done instead?
And what would you have done instead? Absolutely, yeah.
Brilliant, awesome. And then moving on, what have you? Well, who should we start with? Whoever wants to answer first. What have you learned from your own journey that you think would be important for future manufacturing leaders to know? So, if you were in their position, what would you have wanted to know?
You touch on a little bit later about the a mentor, but which I didn't have really growing up per se as a mentor, but I suppose what you would want to do is you want to seek out mentors is something that I would have preferred to have done when I was younger. And had I known how to seek out a mentor, it would have been a lot easier for me to run a business, and how to run the business. But instead, what actually happened was I found that I just had to make the mistakes, learn from my mistakes, and then rectify the mistakes and then go forward. And I find myself still doing that today, but I'm able to quickly reach out a lot faster now and get the assistance that I need, either from my team or from an external source. So that's what I would think is something that I would have loved to have known when I was younger, is that you quickly need to look for mentors to go and walk that road with you if you are in manufacturing or whatever the thing is, so that you can really bounce those ideas off of them. Am I doing this right, and specifically somebody that is in business that has got 10 years or 20 years experience. But even if they've just got a little bit more experience than you, even that is just gold. Yes. You don't have to keep on making the mistakes. Yeah. And we've made mistakes for thousands of years. So let's rather not make those mistakes anymore. Let's just find a mentor that has learned that and go from there. So that's what I think I would have liked to have done differently, and certainly would give advice to do if I was a young entrepreneur.
So you would engage a mentor earlier, and you would advise others to understand how important mentoring is,
yes,
and seek out a mentor much earlier.
Much earlier, yeah, definitely.
And I know for myself, I really struggled with, even when people did suggest it, thinking I didn't want to burden someone else with my issues, like I'll figure it out. Was there any of that for you as well?
So yes, I think absolutely. I suppose that's why I don't go and seek a mentor that quickly. But I think it's something, again, that you probably have to force yourself, if that's your personality of, I know it all, or I'm the better one, and just, think that you can do it all yourself. It's really stopping and saying to yourself, well, why am I not achieving my goal quick enough? or something like that.
Brilliant. And like you said, in over 1,000 years, how much quicker could we have accelerated as a civilization if we didn't keep making the same mistakes?
Yes. And then I suppose, just trying to, before starting something, really dig deep into whatever you are wanting to start. Go and do proper research into that. And I suppose, again, the mental side comes into it, is go and say, is this the correct thing that I'm doing? Should I have an accountant or shouldn't I? Or should I outsource the accountant? I mean, that's just something simple that you could do. I don't know, there's many examples, but yeah.
Brilliant, thanks. And Bronwynn, for you?
Goodness. I think I agree with Steve completely on mentorship. I think also surrounding yourself by exceptional people. I think we all have phenomenal skills in certain areas and we all have weaknesses in certain areas. I think in my business ownership career before I joined PIMMS Manufacturing, just recognizing that it's a really hard balance when you're a smaller business growing to know where to spend the money and where to do it yourself. And probably I would have spent the money earlier. I think I look at us now and I go, I would have sucked it up and spent the money on having the people who can fulfill the sections that are missing before running less risk by not spending the money. So I think the other thing I would probably encourage people, I said it earlier about fear of failure, but Winston Churchill has got a quote, and I'll probably ad-lib it terribly, but it's failure is never fatal, success is never final, all that counts is the courage to continue. And I think that if I had recognized that before we started our journey, knowing that I am going to fail, it's not a maybe, there will be failures, but that actually, it's either a success or it's a next attempt. That's kind of the guarantee. So I think just recognizing and really helping people steel themselves for the fact that it's awesome, but it is hard and it's not always going to go well. And that's okay. That is okay.
Yeah, no, I think I want to add to the failure part of it is that it's okay to fail, which is one thing. But also I think it's important to know what is your skill. So what are you really good at? And if you don't have that skill available, to what Bronwynn is saying is actually seek out that skill and put it into your organization. Now, whether that is just an outsourced skill that you need to do for that period, and then you build up to, I need that outsourced all the time, and then you employ that person, great, do that. But really stop again and take score of where you're at, and then say, okay, right, I've got these different skills in these different areas, and I'm lacking in these different areas. Let's get that skill. So maybe you might not be a futurist, as an example. Well, get somebody to help you with your vision going forward, and then you are looking towards that, and then you can start building on that future. But if you didn't have that skill, you would be always stuck in the business and not working on the business, which is something that's so important for entrepreneurs to know.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest challenges is pulling yourself out and, like you say, working on the business instead of in the business. And what you were saying as well, both of you, is understanding when you need a particular skill that you maybe don't have. A lot of small companies struggle with when to hire an HR manager. And a lot of them, when they finally do, or marketing manager, or whatever the example is for you, and when they finally do, they go, wow, I should have done this 3 years ago, Right. But at the time, if you did consider it, maybe you were thinking, like, can we afford that salary every month? Is it really going to generate that kind of return? But another thing comes back to what you were saying, is that because you don't have that skill, you might actually not know that you need it.
Yes.
And that, I think, is what you were saying about the mentoring, is having that mentor to bounce it off, someone who's been there who can say to you, hire a marketing manager.
Yes. And again, possibly doing some sort of a test, like we do the Gallup Strength Finder, which is something that is so cheap and reasonable, and it very quickly helps you to understand where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. So straight away, go to Gallup Strength Finder, do a Gallup Strength Finder, say, oh, I'm a futurist and I'm a visionary, great, but I'm not they call them a woo. Now, a woo is somebody that is able to. Well, then you explain what a woo is. You probably explain it better than I do.
No, but to your point exactly, I think we work incredibly well together, but we're complementing each other's I suppose I won't say weaknesses, but the areas that I'm not strong in, and I'm assisting in the areas that Steve is not naturally strong in. So.
And you need to find those complementary people as soon as possible.
And balance the whole company out. Yes. So again, what's really nice is when you do it around across your whole company, specifically your management, you actually start seeing there's 4 quadrants that you have in the Gallup Strength Finder, and it tells you exactly where your people are situated within your company, and sometimes you are only in this quarter, and then you really need to start saying to yourself, sure. My whole company is lacking on these other 3, or you might be in 2, the other 2 are lacking. And so you need to start saying, okay, how do I start employing these type of characters and strengths within our company to complement the whole team, and then you'll start seeing that the company becomes a full-rounded company, and you service your customers just so much better, when you do that. So.
Yeah, Bronwynn, you are a problem solver and you mentioned challenges. So what is your advice for future leaders in terms of challenges? What would you say are some of the biggest challenges they should expect to encounter in their manufacturing career?
My experience thus far is growth. Just the cost of growth, not just from a rand perspective in South Africa, but the cost of growth on resources, the cost of growth on rethinking. So we've often talked about, or I often talk about with us, if you take a balloon and you start blowing it up, it kind of really easily reaches that point, and then it's quite hard to get past that point. And I think the biggest challenge I see in most businesses going from one man with a machine to a fully fledged business is getting past that pain point. The growth pain point is actually phenomenally hard, because it costs you money, it costs you comfort. To your point, you're now adding resource, which costs cost. You need investment to be able to grow. So from that perspective, I think the biggest problem or challenge that I see in this industry is the scalability, is actually scaling effectively. What the answer is for that, I don't know. I think again, I say exceptional people. It's having the right people around you, because apart from having the income, that is a fundamental part, is the cash flow. But apart from the cash flow, you are physically not able to scale an entire business as one person. It's not a realistic picture, and I think that's very often where people fall over, is trying to save enough costs so that you don't spend on people, and then you actually can't sustain any kind of growth. So I think to our point, we have spent a lot of time this year building foundations. Everybody knows the analogy of building on solid foundations. But we have been in a growth phase, and it has been almost a bit of a slowdown for us to go, if we don't have solid, slowly built foundations, we will grow on top of something and topple over. We actually won't sustain that growth, and we won't be able to carry that growth. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge I see, is just really bridging or shifting out of small into large, that shift.
The next level.
Yeah.
And Steve, from your experience?
Yeah, biggest challenges. So I think I'd probably go through my career rather to saying what are those challenges and what I've experienced in the career or my career. But one of the challenges that I've experienced through the years is skill amongst our, let's say, call it blue-collar workers. So we find that they're extremely willing to work. There's no problem with the willingness. But the educational side of it is really lacking. So that's something that has been a big challenge for us, and trying to figure out how to then, who do we employ, So do we employ somebody that can not pass the test and we skill them up? Well, that might take us too long, So we then find, no, okay, let's rather turn that person away who actually was an extremely good worker, and choose the person who maybe could pass the test, but maybe not as skilled in what we need them to be. So I think that has been a big challenge for me in my career, just the skill part of it.
Now, Steve, talking about skills, if you were to design a curriculum for future manufacturing leaders, what are some of the new skills you would want to factor in?
A new curriculum? No. So I mean, the first question would be is, if they've got a matric, why would they not be able to read an English document? So I don't know, I think that is a fundamental failure of our country, unfortunately. And we're going to have to look hard and fast at how we resolve that problem.
You know what I think we would add into though? We were chatting about it, the sort of skill sets that didn't exist in our industry. If we think about some of the tools that we've applied into our business to set vision and future, that's a skill that I think is lacking, that should actually be taught all the way back at school. I don't know if you want to jump onto that, but it has changed this business significantly, understanding the skill of setting future, vision, goals.
Yeah, maybe giving them that foresight to be able to do that. So if the curriculum could look like, let's have a section where we do the Gallup tests, or we do, is that what you're referring to, where you're saying we could actually start skilling them up within their own strengths?
Yeah, I think more what I'm referring to is we applied through a company that assisted us. We applied a process called the 7 Ps, which is just one of many vision setting, goal setting programs. But what we discovered, and I never learned this in a curriculum for any career, but really specifically around entrepreneurial business, is to have a vision and a dream and a desire in your head of where you want something to go is 10% of the picture. So to be ambitious is one thing, but until you actually articulate that out onto paper in a written form that is measurable, you actually are not driving in that direction. I was saying to Steve, I don't know who, because I've heard it like fourth round. Somebody once came up with the analogy, which was great. But if you take an elastic band and you stretch it out between your hands, an elastic is always going to resolve towards the most stable state, like tension will resolve to the most stable state. So if your current existence or the current size of our business or where we're at is the most solid state for us, then the tension is always going to resolve back to where we're at now. Whereas what we found as a business is when you define and you clarify and you really formalize where we are going to be, like not just we want to be by this date in this year, we will be here. This is what we will look like. This is how many staff we'll have. This is the processes that will be in place. The more we solidify the future vision, the more we are starting to resolve, the tension is starting to resolve naturally towards that. And that really, I think, is probably a skill that you need as a business owner. So, in this industry and every industry, if we're going to add in pieces that are not typical curriculum, I think that is a skill that every business owner should have.
Envisioning the future.
Clearly envisioning, concrete envisioning of the future. Yeah.
Yeah, so not just dreaming. I think that's the critical part, is that everybody can be a dreamer. Yeah. And that's often what you find with entrepreneurs, is that they've got a futuristic personality, but then they don't know how to put that on paper, articulate themselves, and then work towards that goal. And I think that was, later on you mentioned it, but that was actually one of the other turning points of our company. Is about 5 or 6 years ago, we got a company in to actually be able to articulate what was in my brain and what my preferred, they called it a preferred future, was, and put that onto paper. And then they used like Bronwynn said, the 7 Ps, we'll go through it a bit later, to be able to get us there. And then we started to chip away at each P. Let's actually mention this: profitability, pipeline, process, people, products. And you work on each and every one of them to get you to that preferred future. And then what is it doing? It's allowing you to, again, work on the business instead of in the business. It actually forces you to get out of your business and work on it. So that is a key factor to it.
Thank you. Now, when you speak to aspiring leaders, and maybe even your own children, what is it you tell them about social media? How should they navigate social media to build their own leadership brand?
Stay away from it.
Stay away, yeah. Never ever go there. My opinion on social media, granted there is a huge marketing value to it, but I think if we want to talk specifically about this industry, about the manufacturing industry, my feeling about the real value in social media lies behind collaboration. So there is a lot of knowledge and skill and experience locked up in individuals. You know, Steve's experience of growing this business is invaluable to so many people, that my honest feeling about what I would say to my kids is, if you're going to engage on that level, build knowledge, you know, collaboration and knowledge and skill sharing. And we're finding the reality we're seeing in South Africa is when crisis hits, everybody bands together. And the same logic for me applies and should across industries, is you are an industry leader, and if you want to be an industry leader, part of the mandate on that is you should be bringing other leaders along with you and sharing that. And I really feel that should be the core focus of social media in this environment for us.
To educate other leaders and be a mentor.
And to be a mentor, yeah, and to share knowledge widespread and experience, and to that point of, you know, help others not step over the same or trip over the same things. And
yeah, I think you've got to, you know, again, South Africa itself is such a small country that often us entrepreneurs are feeling like we need to keep it all here instead of, you know, here is the information. There's so much work to go around. Let's just share it. And I suppose that's what we should be trying to change with our social media, is that we're actually collaborating with the injection molder or manufacturer next door, and you know, potentially saying, well, I've just installed the EpiCore system. Well, how can you know, utilize that to benefit your business? Well, this is how it's going to benefit you. And so we could be either in totally different industries and share that knowledge, or in the same industry and still share the same knowledge. It's not a problem. But really trying not to keep it in. And I suppose that's where social media could help us to try and break out of that mold that we are so stuck in.
It's that mentality of, rather than fighting over your piece of the pie, focusing on growing the whole pie. Yeah.
And tell us, Steve, how do you believe the impact, or what do you believe the impact of the coronavirus will have on the landscape, the manufacturing landscape in South Africa?
Yeah, so coronavirus and any epidemic or any crisis that we are in as South Africans, I think, first of all, we are, I want to say, a really resilient country, and our personalities as South Africans are resilient. And so yes, it is a crisis that we are going through, but out of a crisis there's always something that comes good out of it. And I think the big thing is that it's we as entrepreneurs and youngsters have to focus on the positivity, not the negative. And that's what we do as South Africans. And I really feel that the landscape is going to change to be positive rather than negative. Why? Because people in our country are starting to say, no, we can actually do this ourselves. And they start finding out very quickly that it is actually simple to do manufacturing, as an example, or bring a machine in from China or America or Europe and do it ourselves. So I think, again, you know, yeah, just it's going to be for the positive. I don't think we're going to come out of this thing and say that was so bad, the country's now ruined. We will turn it around, and I'm very excited for the future. Yeah.
Great.
I want to ask on that question around the coronavirus. I mean, like some companies or industries, you know, maybe found it a little bit easier because, let's say in IT, you send everyone home and they carry on working on a laptop at home. Like, how has that been for manufacturing? I mean, obviously they can't go home and work on the
Yes. I'll answer some of it. I think, you know, in the beginning, it was very challenging to try and understand how we're going to get through this new way of working. Because half our company has to be at work and the other half can be at home. So what do we want to choose, you know? And you really have to choose. Well, obviously the one part you have to choose, they have to work at work, you know. So come up with solutions to solve that problem. Maybe it's different shifts or et cetera, et cetera. And then the other half, you know, we had to start learning how to actually solve those problems. So we went on, got teams, etc. Timesheets obviously started to get implemented, and what it again did is it actually starts to benefit the company, because you start being able to work so much more efficiently, even if you're working at home. So even out of, again, I'm going to say, even out of this negative space that you're in, there's still this massive positive factor that comes through. And we are finding as a company that we are a lot more efficient in doing it, and we don't even need to put in that many hours to get the same results out. Our turnover, as an example, hasn't decreased; it's increased. Our communication to our customers hasn't decreased; it's increased. Why? There's something that's changed, and we've obviously have changed with coronavirus as an example in this specific instance. So that's how our company has dealt with it, per se. I don't know, I think, Bronwynn, maybe you can add to, add to that.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely put pressure. You suddenly have, in South Africa, it is hard to run a business from a process and policy perspective. There are a ridiculous number of regulations and processes, and when Corona came in, that just escalated at high speed. That said, I mean, you said it earlier, it's quite astounding to watch how resilient South Africans are. So to your point, I mean, importing was an issue, importing material, access to those sorts of things, but we now end with a larger supply base. It kind of the forcing of we can't get what we need is the lie down and die, or the hunt, and we have opened a whole new chain of suppliers because we needed to. So yeah, and I mean, and to Steve's point, we were probably a little bit behind technology-wise, probably, and suddenly had to leap 10 steps ahead and become efficient on that front, and we have. And so yeah, I think Corona is devastating from a human perspective. From a business perspective, again, our industry was not the worst hit. There are essentials. It did slow down a little bit right in the cracks, but yeah, it's definitely not the worst hit.
Thankfully, yeah.
Yeah, thankfully.
Like you said, out of a big negative, often a huge positive can come from that. And it created that burning platform that forced the change, whereas it may have taken 5 years to get to that maturity that you're talking about.
Yes, slowly.
No. Yeah. I read a really interesting poll, it's a joke, but it said, like, who drove digital transformation in your business? And it says A, the CIO, B, the CEO, C, COVID.
Absolutely.
Cool. Coming back to the mentoring, let's start with you, Steve. As a mentor of future leaders, can you share a success story of one of your mentees, or of a relationship that you had with a mentee, so someone you've mentored?
Yes. So I don't per se have a mentee that I mentor, but what I can say is that I mentor our staff quite well. I really have, again, probably over the last couple of years, it's a skill that you have to learn, and you have to have a training type of skill, but you also need to know how to mentor. I think that is it. And so I wanted to say that I only really started to realize that with in our church, really. That's where it actually started, and they do a mentor program, and they teach you how to mentor. And in doing that, then I applied that knowledge back to our company. And somebody like Conrad, who works for us, I mentor him in certain instances. And we've just seen how he was originally working for another company and started to obviously enjoy my personality, see that he wanted to be mentored by me. He started at our company since then, and he grew from just being a quiet, not a business thinking person, to somebody that has now actually is running one of our brands, and is completely dealing with the customer on a level of, I'll take a contract, I'll read the whole contract, and here it is here, Mr. Customer, without even really involving me much, because we have mentored him and giving him the space that he needed to actually flourish. So I think that is that is a success story that I would like to share, you know, in terms of Conrad. But there's many of them, you know, within our own company that I think, yeah, we wouldn't be where we are right now if it wasn't for them, the staff of our company, and I think, again, the mentoring that potentially that I also do for them, yeah.
Excellent. And then on that, it's interesting what you say about your church giving training on how to be a mentor. I think that's brilliant. And it touches on the fact that that's maybe missing from education in general.
Yes.
And also maybe if you'd had the opportunity to have a mentor earlier, then you would have absorbed some of that learning on how your mentor mentored you, and then be able to pass that on. So like you were saying, encouraging people to get a mentor earlier means they can then do the same thing for the next generation as well.
So I'll give you a very good example, that the Heronbridge School, which is halfway to Michalisburg, part of the Kiro School, they have actually got a program where they allocate mentors already to their school, their scholars. And I just, you know, I clicked back then and it was like, wow, that is something that, again, you know, unless it started from the beginning being early on in the child's life, you don't learn the skill to mentor somebody or to be mentored. So I'm really proud of them to actually be doing that. And if more schools can do that, it's such a simple way to solve a lot of problems and just shift that knowledge over to the next person. So yeah, it gives me goosebumps, you know, just saying, please, schools, do that more often, put more mentors in place. And it teaches everybody it will be a better world at the end of the day. So yeah.
Brilliant. Very good to hear that Heronbridge is so progressive. That's awesome.
Yeah, very much so.
And Bronwynn, for you, a success story in terms of mentoring?
I don't think I've ever formally mentored anyone either. Yeah, no, I think, again, like you say, it's an attitude. I think one of my passion points is really like women in business. I can't help but say, I really just recognizing how much women bring into environments that they haven't typically functioned in, and also just how much, I don't know if it's an upbringing or if it's just a personality trait, but women second guess themselves in environments that are not typically female. So really, I think most of the spaces where I have really just enjoyed and found people released is sitting in conversations, validating that what you are thinking is in fact correct. You know, I had a young friend who ended up in an engineering firm, and they wanted her there. They had put her in the firm, and she was quite young and quite junior, but they kept inviting her into all these senior meetings. And I think just sitting with her and recognizing that you are not an engineer, but the fact that you're at the table means you bring something fundamental and something valid into that conversation. If you sit silently, they lose out on what it is you can bring in. You know, 10 engineers around the table have 10 engineering brains, which limits them, to be said about a skill set, to engineering. You know, there's no diversity, there's no lateral thinking, and the fact that you're not an engineer in this environment doesn't mean that you have no value to add. And in fact, the fact that you're seeing it completely differently to everyone else around the table is valuable, rather than, you know, sit quietly and say nothing. So yeah, I don't know if I have success stories in the sense of, you know, an individual person who changed the world, but I have a number of people that I walk in relationship with who walk in similar spaces that I do. And just being able to encourage them into that is, yeah, that's something I thoroughly enjoy. And I enjoy seeing them then sit down and function confidently in those spaces. Yeah.
It's energizing for you as well to be able
absolutely.
to give that back.
Absolutely. And then, you know, the flip side of that, which is really wonderful, is those people grow and they are able to mentor you into other spaces. So that really for me is wonderful, where I'm, you know, walking a path with somebody and our paths may part, and we come back at a later stage and they've also walked completely, they've sort of stepped off. What is that? You step on somebody else's springboard and you jump far ahead, which is really, I think, what the point of mentoring is not to bring you up to my level. That, you know, that would be limiting. The point is to give you what I've got and shoot you off into the future. And hopefully at some point you come back and you can give me back what you've got and shoot me further again.
I agree. I think you often do get so much out of mentoring someone as well. It's not just you giving to them, you get so much from them as well.
Absolutely.
Which is awesome. I think also interesting for me is that I quite like the coaching process in terms of mentoring. So exactly what you're talking about, the idea that it's not that you're trying to get someone to your level, it's how can you get them to the best they can be. So how can you facilitate, how can you coach them up to the best they can be, which hopefully is better than you are.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a huge success story. But yes, I suppose to your point of, if mentoring was to bring somebody to your own level, they'd need to make all the same mistakes you did. Yeah. That would be missing the point completely. Yeah.
Brilliant. And then back to you, Steve. Who are some role models of leadership that you would recommend that future manufacturing leaders should study? Ones that maybe you've learned a lot from and that you would say, go and have a look at this person.
So I think role models have flaws as well. So I want to just say that. But Elon Musk is somebody that I would suggest you could look at as a role model. He is a role model in certain senses for me. So I want to explain that a little bit more, because some of it I disagree on and some of it I agree on. Where Elon Musk is really strong is he is a go-getter. So he really is able to see the future and build on the future, which is something that is obviously resonates with myself. And he is able then to gather people again, probably to assist him to get to where he needs to be. He obviously, on the negative side is he'll just mow down whatever's not working for him, which is not what I enjoy about Elon Musk himself. But he is a South African. He's got a lot of resilience, and that's why he does so well too.
I like the way you brought back the positive there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so. But no, I've got a lot of respect for the guy. He's got, he has really, a lot of people said you couldn't do it, and he said, I will do it. And he's stubborn, and he stuck to his guns. I think that was also something that probably when I was reading his book, it was something that stuck out quite a lot for me, is that he really, really he knew what he wanted to go to Mars. When he was 18, he knew that he wanted to go to Mars. How was he going to get to Mars is the question. So he then had to leapfrog to certain industries to get to Mars. And that's what he's done, So eventually in another 2 or 3 or whenever he wants to launch his ship to Mars, he will get there, And I think that's long-term thinking, which is what I like about Elon Musk, is that he's got that really long-term thinking, and he knew right back then when he was 18 what he wanted to do. And it was something that he was really passionate about. So I think probably passion is another thing that I really like about Elon Musk himself. He's very passionate. And that's probably why some people see him in the incorrect light, It's because he's so passionate. They see him as, he's just being horrible to me. No matter. The next person that I see is Richard Branson. So what I like about Richard Branson is he's a real people person. If you look at a lot of Virgin Active's staff members, they probably haven't all met him, but they know what his culture is. They know what his personality is. They know what his end goal is. It's not just to make money. It's about building up a company, yes, but also building the person themselves up to work for a great company. And that's what I like about himself, is that he doesn't just focus on the money. He focuses on the people themselves. So if I had to join the two role models together, that's what I would like about Elon Musk, and that's what I like about Richard Branson. Yeah.
We need an Elon Branson.
Yeah, we need an Elon Branson. That's absolutely.
I really like what you're saying there, because I agree that I think it's a great idea taking the best parts of the role models, because nobody's perfect, and each person's journey might fit yours in a different way. So, some parts that you find negative about Elon might be positive for other people, or maybe negative for everyone, but it doesn't matter. I think it's unfortunate that some people put people on a pedestal and then break them down and ignore everything that they've said just because of one negative aspect.
Yes.
Like, take what's good for you and take it from multiple people. And Bronwynn, for you?
I don't have a world famous role model. I would probably call them like micro role models. But I have multiple role models who are actively active in my life. I have, I think if I think of people, it's more to your point, just the traits that I look at and I aspire to in a lot of the people I know. I have a good friend who decided to buy, she started working for a property company and was clearly adamant she could do a better job than they were doing. So she bought the company and walked into she's a gorgeous blonde woman who walked into a property industry and has just taken it by storm, which I think that is phenomenal as a role model, the confidence to see it, believe I can do it, and just shoulders back and do it. I think that's astounding.
That's brilliant. What company or what's in it?
So they're called the Ancora Group, Marianka Victor. She's just an astounding human. Like that's seriously impressive. And then I think on a human level, I have a couple of people as well, but one comes to mind. Her name is Kim Ballantyne. And she has faced more adversity than I can fathom with her and her family, and is the most remarkably kind and caring and mentoring human. So she just is a well of knowledge and what would the right word be? Just wisdom. There we go. She has a well of wisdom that is able to pour out to other people when she has suffered so much and had so much come against her. So I think that's two examples. There are a number of people that I know personally and have seen walk these journeys that I aspire to. I could go on with a number of people, but I think that's really, for me, that's how I function. It is finding just those golden threads with people and going, I would love to hear how you've done that. I would love to understand how you've done that. And I would love to walk with you on that front. Yeah.
And like you say, learn from those people.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a TED talk, I think it might have been TEDx, that I saw. I've forgotten the name now, but it's a lady who talks about adversity and how to overcome it. And that she had studied it. I think she did a PhD on it. But you expect just another story, and someone telling you from their point of view how to overcome adversity, and then she tells you that she lost her daughter in a car accident.
Yeah.
And it's like
it changes it completely, right? Yeah. I must say the other person I want to mention, because she'll kill me for mentioning her, but the other person that I aspire to is Veronique, who's our CCO. She's also Steve's wife, so I look at him when I say that. For many perspectives, but I think the one that really stands out for me is she is absolutely glamorous. She is one of the most intelligent people you will meet. She functions, she's hardcore, she's capable, she's driven, but at no point does she feel she needs to hide the fact that she's gorgeous. And again, that might sound odd to a room full of men, but she doesn't downplay the fact that she is all of these things and just a woman, like a really beautiful woman. She doesn't try and hide that because you can't be both of those things, or so again, I aspire to that, because I think you do generally find people will play down, don't look too feminine. I think that's the word, feminine. Don't look too feminine, because we're being serious here. Yes, this is a serious conversation, and I just think she lives that line so incredibly well. And if you meet her, you will within seconds know how formidable she is. So I think that's an incredible.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, obviously, if you are talking about her, she's an unsung hero in our company.
Absolutely.
Because, being the CEO and attorney, that's her profession. Yeah. It's all the back end that actually gets sorted out. And I think that's where Bronwynn is referring also a lot to, is that, often she's not at the forefront, so she won't be presented all the time, but really she does form the backbone of our company. And when you say role model, yes, I think that's how I see her to you. There's that forming that backbone and keeping it there all the time.
She's formidable. And I think a lot of that, to your point of this, you would never have hired, let's be honest, early days of running a business, you don't hire a lawyer. Nobody can afford to hire a full-time lawyer. But if I look at the structure that exists in this business, because of the benefit of having this person who has made sure that your every T is crossed, every I is dotted, you're building off a base that is a little unfair, because other businesses don't get to do that. So she really has built that structure. Yeah.
And strategic as well, very strategic. So on her strength finders, so yeah.
Kerry we think she's
That's,
awesome. She's not here, but
She's also, yeah, absolutely, but she's definitely my role model as well, you know, so it's something that that I look to her and I bounce a lot of ideas off of her because she's just got that brain that actually has the strategic side to her that assists me in making decisions. I certainly don't make them all by myself, although it does seem like I do that, you know. It's definitely not that. It's actually a group of people and that's, I suppose, where teams come into it, but yeah.
Yeah. But behind every man, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then
There's a
behind
good
every
woman.
CEO also a CCO. It's a good combination.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, as leaders in your industry who have so much to share, how should our listeners and future leaders connect with you? And where should they follow your thought leadership?
You go, Bron.
okay, well, it's the same. I suppose we have a website, so you can get hold of us on pimmsgroup.co.za. We both have LinkedIn profiles.
Yes.
We do have Facebook pages, but I suppose, yeah, LinkedIn profiles or our website. You're welcome to get hold of us.
Yes.
And last but not least, what's your message for the millions of kids around the country and the world who might be considering a career in manufacturing? What should they focus on? Is there one piece of advice that you would really like to convey to them that they should implement in their own career, in their own life?
Oh, can I jump in one? Take the clock apart.
Nice.
Break it. It's fine. Yeah. Break it. No. I don't know if there is one piece of advice. Do you have a profound?
One piece of advice. It's okay to fail.
Yes.
It's okay to fail, you know. And then once you've failed, get up and do it again. And do it again and do it again until you come right.
Yeah.
Like I said, look for role models, look for mentors, look for ways in which you can advance yourself and fulfill the skills that you don't have. I think that is the key to being successful at the end of the day. And don't be scared. I think that is the other thing, is that manufacturing isn't scary at all. Even though it looks scary, it's not scary. Break it down, understand it, and then work on the parts that you got on and get other people to work on the parts that you're not good on. So that would be my advice to them.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership and really inspiring us with your story and the PIMMS story, if I may call it that way.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.